Hey folks, my name is Bonnie Garcia-Glockner. I am the Associate Director for the Office of National Fellowships. Also here today is Tina Liu, who is our Assistant Director for ONF. And then the third part of our advising triangle is Dr. Keith McCall, who is the Acting Director for the Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards. So first off, thank you all so much for being here. I know that a lot of folks are probably going to be watching this after the fact, and this will be up on the Canvas site for Fulbright as well. But this is the perfect time of year if you're thinking about applying to Fulbright to start thinking on selecting a country and award type. This can be really hard to narrow down, especially if you're not exactly sure what you want to do. So we hope that this is going to provide you with some just tips on how to approach that process as you're first starting out. I see that we only have a few people in the meeting right now, but if you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat as we go, and Tinky will be monitoring the chat throughout. Okay, so now it doesn't work. Hang on. Okay, so an overview of what we're doing today. We have got, let's see if I can hide. Can I hide this? Loading me. There we go. Okay. So today we're going to go over the different award types. We're going to talk about some things that you may want to consider when you're choosing a country. Also going to discuss clarifying some of your goals. So in clarifying those goals, you may find it just easier to narrow down what you're looking for out of the Fulbright experience. Some additional considerations, and then we'll go over the actual award search function that is on the Fulbright website. And at the very end, we will leave room for questions. When I went through this the other day, this was about 20 minutes, so there should be lots of time for questions after the fact. Why isn't it working? Now that I'm actually presenting, it's going to be a pain in the butt. Okay. So the Fulbright, as I'm sure many of you are aware, sort of comes in these two basic flavors as far as awards. You can go the English Teaching Assistantship route, or ETA, or you can go the Study Research Award route. The Study Research Award then can be divided into graduate degree enrollment. It can be an academic project. It can also be a creative or arts project. So there are lots of ways to shape your Fulbright Award into the experience that you're looking for. I'll preface this before we get too far into the presentation that the short answer for most things Fulbright is, it depends. If you have gone through at least a preliminary look into Fulbright, you'll see that there are about 160 countries and regions that work with Fulbright. Each of those has their own commission or their own post that is in charge of that area or country. And that commission or post is responsible for what gets put onto the award page for the different Fulbright awards. So you'll see that the headers for these awards are pretty much the same, right? They'll tell you candidate profile. They'll tell you, stipend award amount, right? They'll tell you maybe foreign language requirements, but the information under those headers can be incredibly different, even from like country to country, neighbors, for crying out loud. So in short, making sure that as you're working through your options, you are keeping maybe a bookmark on the ones that stick out to you the most, so that when you do begin writing your application, you have very quick access to what that country is looking for in detail. So the ETAs, this English Teaching Assistantships, primary function, right, is going to be teaching English. But you're also you're usually the only American in the classroom. That's how a lot of Fulbrighters end up describing it. So you are going to be the person who is that cultural touchstone for the students in your class. The students are going to come in a wide variety of ages, right, or educational levels. And that is also something to consider when you're choosing where you might go for an ETA. So maybe you're working with elementary school students, or maybe you are working with like a community center, right? It can vary quite wildly. So ETAs are usually working between 20 to 40 hours a week. And then some countries are also asking folks to do a supplemental project. Sometimes that's a requirement, sometimes it's just suggested. But that's another way for you to get involved with the community where you will be stationed for the ETA. And some of these will require a foreign language proficiency. Not all of them. In fact, some of them will say, well, we really want people with teaching experience, but not all of them. ETA is probably the most flexible of the awards just because as long as you're willing to teach for a certain amount of time, you can go pretty much anywhere with that award. The second type of award are the study research awards. And so these, like I said, fall into those three categories. Graduate degree enrollment also means that you're applying and being accepted into that graduate degree program. So with Fulbright, you'll be done by October with the national deadline. Usually those applications for the graduate schools aren't opening up until November. So it is very, very common. In fact, I have yet to see it otherwise, where someone finishes their Fulbright application and then we're going into applying to the university proper. With the timeline for Fulbright, folks are finding out by about the end of January whether or not they're a semifinalist. And then from there, if they're a semifinalist, they may be asked to upload the letter of acceptance to the university. But these are two separate processes. So you are applying for a position with both of them with that regard. And then with the academic and creative projects, these are requiring an in-country affiliation. And what that is someone in country. That could be a professor at a university, that could be a research institute, that could be an archival position, that could be an NGO, right? But someone in country has taken a look at what you want to do in country and has agreed to be your touchstone while you're there. And that letter of affiliation has to have things like, these are maybe the access to materials that they're going to provide. This is the access to maybe people or other resources that they're going to provide. Any sort of access to archives, access to libraries, research institutes, machinery, right? A good letter of affiliation is going to lay out, like, we have looked at what this person wants to do and we support it wholeheartedly. And here's what we're going to provide on our end if they are selected. So that is one of those components that can also change whether or not you want to apply for a study research award versus like an ETA. Just because getting a letter like that can sometimes be difficult, right? So there's lots of options here. Some common questions that we get about this is, can I apply for multiple award types? Not in the same cycle, right? So you can apply for you have one Fulbright application per cycle. That is for one award in one country. So narrowing down that country and award type is crucial to your application. If you don't have those narrowed down, your application is just not going to be specific enough for what you're trying to do. Does every country offer the same awards? No. Again, those commissions, those posts, they are dictating what the country is willing to take on. So if you look at something like the UK, right? They're not going to need people there to teach English. So all of those awards are going to end up being mostly graduate degree enrollment or study research awards. For something like Spain does have study research awards, but they also have one of the largest ETA programs out of the Fulbright program in total. So it really, again, it just depends, but what that country is willing to offer is based on their needs for that given cycle. Okay. So do we have options? Well, yes, of course, you always have options, right? Some of those Fulbright projects are only going to be able to take place in one particular country or region. Others are going to be way more flexible. So the example that we have here is actually two of our graduate student applicants from a few years back. So in this example, right, Denisha just knew that she wanted to be an ETA in South America to practice teaching, but also to practice the language. And then Emily knew that she wanted to conduct this research project that was specific to Japan, right? For Emily, she needed access to specific archives in Japan. There was no other place for which this project was going to work, and that was very clear in her application as well. For Denisha, that choice, right? She could have done plenty of countries, but in looking at what Colombia versus Uruguay were looking for, Uruguay fit what she was looking for better than any of the other countries. So she was able to still go after her goal. She was still able to be in a Spanish-speaking country doing ETA, but it really came down to, okay, which of these two countries better suits me? So if you are just interested in going abroad, maybe to go teach, right? That can have a lot of flexibility with the ETA. If you have a specific project in mind, even if it's one that, could feasibly be done across countries, you still have to choose which country is going to be the specific focus for that. Okay. I'm guessing this is things to consider, but it's blocked for me. Okay. So things to consider. Fulbright does set these parameters of what they're going to accept or what they need. But your decisions and your intentionality are really going to decide where you go. So there's a couple of things you can ask yourself or things that you can consider along the way. What do you want to actually get out of the Fulbright experience? Right? Are you just looking for experience abroad? Are you looking to practice the language? Are you looking to make connections for career later in life, right? Are you looking for maybe potential graduate school enrollment or PhD enrollment down the road? These are all things that you should consider. How does this particular Fulbright connect to whatever your long-term goal is? Sometimes when students look at something like an ETA, they go, well, I don't have teaching experience, so I don't know that I would be the best suited for that. The case that you're making is how can you showcase the skills needed to be a teacher? Maybe it was the times that you were a tutor. Maybe it was the time that you were just helping out other classmates, or the times that you stepped up to be a leader in your classroom. Those skills are still transferable to a classroom. So even though you may not have the technical terms for the pedagogy that you want to use, you still have had experiences that will be valuable if you are in an ETA position. So don't discount yourself automatically just because you haven't had that experience maybe in a classroom or the traditional sense of what a teacher is. I've also had people who talk about, being soccer coaches and being soccer referees, and like they may not have been a teacher in a classroom, but they were certainly a teacher on the field. Even things like that, right? It's about you putting together sort of those connection points of your story and how they might work for what that country is looking for. The other thing to consider here too is that those study research awards don't need to have a thesis. There's not a dissertation. There's not published work attached to that. They should be feasible with the scope of time that you have. So if you only have a year, but you're proposing, a multi-generational ethnographic study, maybe Fulbright isn't really the best way to accomplish that, right? But if you're doing graduate degree enrollment, many of the overseas programs, maybe you're writing a thesis, but they're what's called a taught master's. So you're not having to worry about am I going to have something published by the time I leave? Most of the commissions do give a chance for Fulbrighters to get together sometime while they're overseas so that they can at least present what they've been working on to the group. But it's not something where you have to come back and be ready to, patent something right as soon as you get back. How can you take that experience and then put it towards those long-term goals? Some folks, especially with study research, will look at applying when they're in graduate school. So if the work that they're doing could be applied to their graduate program and what they're trying to do back here, that has been the case sometimes where people have gone overseas, done their project, and that's been a piece of their thesis. But it doesn't have to be. So just things to consider. Don't discount yourself or don't check yourself out of some of these awards because on paper maybe that doesn't seem like something that meshes well with your long-term goals. Let's talk through it. Okay. And yeah, talking about clarifying your goals or clarifying your options and where to start. Two main places to start. That's definitely three questions. We're gonna skip that. It's tiny mistake. Do you have any language skills? Right? If you do, maybe you want to continue using those language skills or at least be able to practice those language skills. If you don't, that's fine too. There's plenty of awards that don't require a language component. But maybe that is something to consider. If you're really keen on that, let's look into the awards that make sense given a language requirement, right? Is there a specific world region you're interested in? So, like, I've had students that were going into business and they knew that they wanted to work in East Asian markets eventually. So, we were looking at Fulbrights that were in that region to see if there was something that might work with their long term goals. Could you achieve your goals in multiple places, right? So, this goes back to that example with Denisha. She could have gone to either country, but when she got down to really the brass tacks of what she was seeing on each of the country pages, one made more sense than the other. Okay. So as you're working through all of those considerations, thinking too about the dynamics of a country, how many total awards are being given each year in that country, right? If you have like three ETA awards being given, what do you think the likelihood is that you're going to be in the same school or the same city as the other ETAs? Right? Probably pretty low. If you know that that sort of isolation is not something that you feel particularly comfortable with, that country may not be suitable for what you're trying to accomplish. Okay. One of the other things that they point out on the country pages is your particular ETA placements. Are you going to be in capital cities, regional cities, rural areas, right? Those are also things to consider. Again, going into that sort of cultural isolation. How comfortable are you going to be if you are, the only ETA, maybe the only American, right? Maybe the only person that really speaks really, really good English there. These are all things that should be considered as you're making your choice. Now on the website, if you click the link there, or at least follow the link there that's on the Fulbright website under applicants, is this award search function. This is a really great tool if you're just starting out or you're just starting to think about some of these questions. You can go in there and say, you know what, I only want to see ETA awards. And I only want to see ETA awards where I'm going to work with elementary school students. And I only want them to be in places where there's no language requirement, right? You'll get back very quickly your options for those countries, and you'll see them sort of briefly like you see on the screen here, and it'll tell you how many awards are being given with those requirements in place. So you can play around with this with study research. There's also a little thing that'll pop up that'll say graduate degree enrollment. So if you're looking at grad enrollment as part of yours, this is another way to do that. This is a nice at a glance type of thing so that you can get maybe a short list together before you start diving further into the individual countries. So ultimately, this comes down to two questions. What do you want to do and where do you want to do it, right? Everything else that we've talked about goes back to these two questions. What is it you want to do? Okay, well, just depending on that, you've already narrowed it down to whether or not you're doing an ETA versus study research, right? Where do you want to do it? That is going to be the one that is more about country dynamics, types of awards, maybe the placement type that you would have. In the case of graduate degree enrollment, it might be what universities are even partnered with Fulbright to allow you to do graduate degree enrollment through them, right? These are all things that come down as you're considering where you want to go and for what award for Fulbright. Okay, I've talked a lot. Does anyone have any questions? And you can feel free to unmute yourself too if you want.
Hi. So if we're probably going to apply for a research award, but we don't have a clear idea of what our research should be on, like right at this moment,
Mhm.
then should I be probably pivoting towards the ETA position, or should I just probably try and figure something out like now?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you are looking at a study research, do you already have a country in mind or a type of program you're looking at?
No, not really. I mean, I know that I'm interested in Eastern Europe,
Hmm.
um, and like art history and things like that. And I know like like what kind of art history I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I'm doing like a research project like this summer, like right now.
Mhm.
So I just haven't had a lot of time to think of like another project on top of this one, if that
For
makes any
sure.
sense.
I think the nice thing about the graduate degree enrollment is it's not necessarily thinking about the project in that regard. It's more like, well, where do you want to be going to school? So if you know that you want to be maybe in like Eastern Europe, and then so going to that award search, for instance, right? Like, okay, I only want to look at Eastern Europe. I only want to look at graduate degree enrollment. Like what are the awards that pop up there? That'll give you an idea of the countries at least. Sometimes people will go then, there are things called named awards. So there are some graduate degree enrollments that it'll be only for this particular university. That is also going to show up on the award search. So you can start seeing like, well, if I did go to this university, what types of programs do they offer, right? Um, if you found a grad enrollment or degree program that makes sense for the things that you want to do, even if you don't know exactly what that is yet, right? You could still write your application from a place of like, well, wanting to go into this field, here's how this particular program is going to benefit me in the long run.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is something that is going to take a little bit of research on the front end, right, to find what works best for you. But I would say if you're leaning more towards, grad enrollment and you at least know the region, I think that is worth looking into before you just pivot to an ETA. Any other questions?
Would you say that open study requires an affiliation?
Open studies don't always require an affiliation. So sometimes, if you go onto the countryside, if it says that there is an open study award, you need to see if they are accepting both graduate degree enrollment and or a independent research project. Most grad enrollments will not require that you have, excuse me, an affiliation letter or the acceptance letter. I think the only country I can think of right now is I think Germany says if you do a graduate degree enrollment, they need to see something that shows that at least you meet the minimum requirements to be admitted to the school, not that you've yet been admitted. But that is not common. Um, if you are doing a research project, however, or a creative project, 9 times out of 10, you will have to have an affiliation letter as part of your application. That's part of why we start talking about this now, because trying to get that affiliation letter and getting that before, not getting it before the summer kicks off, but having it in hand by the campus deadline can take a bit of time. So we want to make sure people are starting to contact folks within the next month about those affiliation letters so that it's not like a surprise coming into September.
But it also wouldn't hurt to have like some sort of faculty support letter for open enrollment.
Yeah.
Happens later.
Yeah, I think sometimes faculty get a little nervous because they're like, well, I don't know if this person's going to get in. And then some faculty members just go, well, if this person does get in, we'd love to have them, right? even if you don't necessarily attach that to your application, that can be handy as you're writing, because you may say, part of why you're maybe looking forward to this program at a specific university is for this faculty member that is in their field, and you've already started making connections with them so that you could be in their reading group or be in one of their classes, right? So I don't think it hurts to start making those connections, even if it's not necessarily for an affiliation letter for grad enrollment. Sorry. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if you're watching this now and you haven't yet done so, here is the QR code to enroll in the Canvas course. So we have a pretty We have a pretty robust process at Florida State with deadlines sort of all throughout the summer so that people stay on track for their application. Our first one coming up is going to be June 4th, and that is the day that everyone has to be in the Canvas course and complete the intent to participate, which is in there. That lets us know that you're really interested in pursuing the Fulbright through FSU. And then our campus deadline is in early September. So everything has to be in around that date. But if you're going through the Canvas course, you will see all of that too. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you watching. Wow. Appreciate you being here. And if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can always, the three of us are really your Fulbright advising triangle, and we're happy to help however we can. All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.